Well, hey there everyone, welcome back to Observe. In today's video we're going to be doing an interesting comparison between the Netflix representation of true crime serial killers and the actual serial killers themselves, and talking about the various differences between their nonverbal performances and displays. This is something that is popular, I might be able to do this more so, but let's go ahead and roll the intro. Today's video is brought to you by longtime supporters of the channel and America's #1 meal kit, HelloFresh. If you're anything like me, then you don't really enjoy going grocery shopping or meal planning. Now, HelloFresh is able to solve both of these problems with ease, as they have 30 dinner recipes of farm-to-table ingredients to choose from every single week. Not only will this save you the stress and hassle of going grocery shopping, but it will ensure that you have that farm fresh flavor every meal. You can select from differing diets, allergy requirements, and they even have a kid-friendly selection perfect for families looking to try something new while school is out for the summer. HelloFresh isn't just good for only your physical body though, it's also good for the health of the planet, as it is the first carbon-neutral meal kit in the world. The ingredients are also pre-packaged and pre-portioned so that you can cut back dramatically on your food waste. So if you're like me and you try your absolute hardest to avoid grocery shopping at all costs, then go to HelloFresh.com, use my code, which is Observe16, and get 16 free meals, plus 3 surprise gifts and free shipping. One of my personal favorite recipes is the spaghetti and sun-dried tomatoes dish. If you do happen to try HelloFresh, I suggest that dish. Let me know what you think of it. And also let me know what your favorite one is if you happen to land on one as well. Again, go to HelloFresh.com and use my code, which is Observe16, to get 16 free meals, 3 surprise gifts, and free shipping. Thanks again to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video, and back to our regularly scheduled programming. Alright, so first up is going to be Ted Bundy and his portrayal by Zac Efron. Let's go ahead and just start right into this.
What do we have here, Ken? Let's see. Oh, it's an indictment, all right. Why don't you read it to me? You're up for election, aren't you? Mr. Bundy?
Okay. Already, I want to go ahead and start by pointing out some of the moves and things that Ted is doing in this area right off the bat. So he's trying to take domination, he's trying to take control of the situation by starting off by, he's starting off with a dominating gesture with his hands on his hips, and then he comes in and he saunters over and he starts talking first, and then he gives the permission for the person to start reading. He's really trying to take control, and what we're not able to see is that on this side of things there are a slew of press people as well. So he's putting on a show, and you could even hear it in his voice with his tone and cadence representing this showmanship style, and this is pretty classic for Bundy's entire trial. When he was in front of the press, he very much interacted with them, and that was part of what really sensationalized this case. But let's go ahead and continue watching.
Mr. Bundy got it, didn't you? Mr. Bundy? You told him that you were going to get me. He said he was going to get me, okay? You've got the indictment. It's all you're going to get. Let's read it.
So as well as this, we see him doing a little bit of a self-soothing gesture up here. This could be nervousness. This could also just be a movement, a scratch that he's doing. It doesn't necessarily have to have an emotional tell to it. Now, right after that, he goes and he gestures at the press, and then he says, "That's all you're gonna get," and he brings out another dominating gesture with the finger pointer in there and points and says, "This is all you're gonna get." And so really, Bundy is trying to manhandle and dominate this entire interview section here as if he were in control and collected throughout the entire thing. Let's continue watching.
Let's go.
Sheriff Ken Kassar has conducted a public reading of the indictment of defendant Theodore Bundy in front of the gathered press.
Step out now, Ted.
What is it? What do we have here, Ken? What is that?
Oh, it's an indictment. Why don't you read that?
Okay, so right off the bat, we're seeing there's a lot more stylization into the show from Netflix on this. But what we're hearing from Zac is similar on the pitch side of things. He has that pitch go up, but it's still more conversational than what Bundy had. Bundy's was definitely more of a performance. He was there showing off more or less. And Zac is capturing that, but it's in a more casual style. That being said, he is trying to mimic the same sort of displays that Bundy was with the crossing of the arms and on the hips. His are a little bit more closed at this point, which would show more possible self-soothing as a self-hug or protection, something along those lines, but he's also doing a manipulator up here, and these are pretty close and pretty similar to what Bundy did. However, we're already seeing a few different little tells here. Let's continue watching.
Yes, I think I will. In the name of...
You're up for re-election, aren't you? Re-election?
In the name of...
You said
and
you were
by
gonna get me.
the authority of the state of...
He said he was gonna get me.
You are charged with...
You got the indictment. That's all you're gonna get.
You are...
Okay, I want to go ahead and pause that there because there was a difference there. You got the indictment, that's all you're gonna get. So you got the indictment, this finger point is different. He's not pointing at the person themselves. This is demanding. This is pointing out a direction. It's still a little bit more dominating with the finger point. If you want to point and not feel like you're being a dominating person, use your hand instead. But he's pointing here. So Zac points at the paper and then does this, and that's a different vibe. Bundy said, that's all you're gonna get, straight to the person that he was talking to. And this is a scolding, this is a domination. Whereas Zac was just pointing at a paper and said, that's all you're gonna get. So there is that difference there. Along with that, we can see that there is more spacing out between what Zac was doing and the person reading. We could see that they kind of amplified the back and forth a little bit for the sake of the show to be able to add more conflict in there, whereas that wasn't the case in real life. But it's fascinating to me to see these differences that Zac is already portraying something more soft and genuine than what the actual Ted Bundy himself presented. And that is an interesting note. Let's continue.
Theodore Robert Bundy, you are charged, indictment, 2 counts burglary, 2 counts murder in the first degree, 3 counts attempted murder in the first degree. Design or intent to effect the death of said Lisa Levy. My chance to talk to the press. Contrary to section 78204 Florida statute. I'll plead not guilty right now. And your grand
charged with...
Okay, so here in the middle of this reading, Bundy breaks that contact. This is another sign of, I am not threatened by you, I am in control of this situation. That was very much his go-to in this. And he says, it's my time to talk to the press. And he's putting on this show in front of the press, undermining the authority of the people around him in a very bold and outright way. He shows that he doesn't care of what's being said about him by the authorities. He shows that he's all about the attention. And now we'll get to see how Zac portrays that as well.
With 2 counts of murder in the first degree and 3 counts of attempted murder.
You know what? I'll plead not guilty right now.
And 3 counts of attempted murder in the first degree in the Chi Omega sorority killings.
My chance to talk to the press. This is it. My chance.
Well, we have displayed the prisoner now.
Yeah, I've been kept in isolation. I've been kept away from the press. I have been buried by you. You've been talking. It's my turn to talk now.
Well, we have a court order. There'll be no press interviews.
Yeah, of course. That makes perfect sense because I'm gagged.
And you are not. You know what? I will be heard.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Yeah, thanks again.
There'll be no questions at this time.
No questions.
Okay, so now we've seen the end of that. So we didn't see any of that extra drama at the end that was packed in on the original footage. It kind of cut off a little bit earlier, and I do find that fascinating. If that did not exist, that entire dialogue situation, then why was it added in once again to be able to add character and emotion to the character Ted Bundy that is being portrayed in this piece of film? So what I've noticed between the two of this is that Bundy was a lot more collected and a lot more controlled on his presentation. Even down at the end where portions were being read, Zac Efron was emoting to those portions and reflecting what was going on with that, whereas Bundy stayed largely stationary and did not emote along with it. And then as he continued to step out and talk to the press, he showed more so that he did not care about what was being said, didn't even acknowledge what was being read, but instead directed his attention towards the press. Zac Efron ended up showing that he was at least listening to what was being read as he was interacting with the press, and some things were kind of out of line there. I will say that Zac did bring in the finger pointing that he was doing at the very end there that did mimic Bundy's from earlier, but once again, since we didn't see that in the original footage, this feels like it was added on, and it would be obviously for the sake of a character. And that seemed to be a pretty consistent theme throughout that depiction of Ted Bundy, is that he was a little bit more humanized than the actual person themselves. It was more entertaining to watch Zac Efron play Ted Bundy than it was to watch Ted Bundy himself, because one is an actor trying to entertain and the other one was not. So there are definite differences there, but I have to give it to Zac, at least in this area, for trying his best to be able to represent what Bundy really did feel and present non-verbally. There were just some areas that he did end up missing just a hair on that. Now we're gonna go ahead and move on to another serial killer, which I have done here on the channel before, Ed Kemper, and his counterpart playing him as well. So let's go ahead and dive right into this.
Well, cops like me because they can talk to me more than they can talk to their own wives, some of them.
Did the cops like you?
Like I said, a friendly nuisance. I got in the way.
I want to go ahead and start by a couple different things. First, I'll note that Cameron's body language when he's in this area is a lot more closed, and he's leaning back, and it's a lot more relaxed and still dominating, but he is definitely in a different nonverbal position than what the actual Ed Kemper was when he was being asked this question. Ed Kemper actually had a tendency, from the footage that I've seen, to sit rather upright, although relaxed at times, not so much as far as Cameron was portraying him to be leaning back. And whether or not this is a confidence thing or just a personal preference thing, it's difficult to say. However, I will also note that there is that difference of dialogue there. The some more than their wives part was added in, and that does add extra depth to that dialogue there, a little bit more character to it, so that would make sense in just story building wise. But let's go ahead and continue forward.
I watch all the cop shows on TV.
Do you know, Joseph Wambaugh, Police Story? You ever watched that?
Huge fan.
Oh.
I got a lot of my insights right there.
Really?
Joseph Wambaugh, Police Story. Got some tremendous insights into not just the gimmicks, the actual things, the tidbits that you would pick up from their procedures, but the mechanics behind that, the logic behind it, was I would not allow myself to walk into even a potential trap.
I would not allow.
Okay, so throughout this, what we're seeing is a lot more happy displays, happiness displays. They are forced, obviously, even in the context of the show itself. This is a forced display of happiness. It's not fully reaching his eyes, but that happiness is displayed in there by Cameron, and it does not exist in Ed Kemper's actual footage. He's a lot more solemn in the actual footage. The only time that we could see a little bit of a smirk come out, perhaps a sign of contempt, that moral or intellectual superiority, comes in when he's talking about kind of dissecting the mechanics of how the police behave. And that really does stylize well with Ed Kemper's entire mindset. He loved the idea of being superior intellectually to everybody around him, and would often talk in such a way to show that he was. So that does make sense to see that little contempt flash out there in that area, but we're seeing this same pattern. Cameron's version is more relatable and personable than the actual person themselves. Very fascinating. Let's continue.
Not allow myself to walk into a trap because I knew exactly how their minds work from watching Wambaugh.
What kind of trap are you talking about?
And one of those was talking about those crimes too much to people, initiating conversations about that.
The classic is talking too much about the crimes, over interest. You have to remain casual.
It would be a guess.
So even in that, I am appreciating how much parallel there is between what was being said in the show Mindhunter, which is obviously the one that we're reacting with, and then the actual interview themselves. I'm appreciating how much direct dialogue there is between the two, and it's carrying along the same basic tone with things as well. I do feel like Cameron did a very good job at Ed Kemper on this, but let's continue watching.
But I'd say right now,
Far more than 35.
in North America, more than 35.
35?
Well, I'm not an expert.
Well, hold on, I'm not an expert. I'm not
Not
an
an
authority.
I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost...
Okay, so I want to note on the tone differences between the two on this area. With Cameron, his is a lot more soft. He's also sitting back, folding his arms. And this all indicates to me that there's a lot less confidence in what's being said. Now that is due to how Cameron is playing the character, but in Ed Kemper's actual presentation of it, he came across as a lot more authoritative and confident because his tone was still lower and he was projecting more. There was no softness or fragility to his tone. Let's continue watching.
For almost 20 years.
I'm just an extremely accomplished murderer.
I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds.
She had a very violently outspoken position on men.
And had a very strong and violently outspoken position on men.
So on this, you could still see Cameron's portrayal is characterized by a partial smirk. That contempt that's coming in fits with Kemper's character, that feeling of intellectual or moral superiority. So that would fit with the character. However, Ed Kemper himself did not display that nearly so often. It was very rare to see that contempt come out in Kemper's nonverbal communication, and that was what was interesting to me when I did an analysis on just him, is that he didn't seem to revel in his intelligence over anybody else as much as many serial killers will. That fascinating facet of it made him feel disjointed, and when Cameron portrayed him, he added in what would make sense, the emotion that would make sense, although it didn't exist in the original ones. So let's continue watching.
Then comes this picture postcard, groovy, happy young couple on the stairs. They walk right past me.
Walking up to my apartment, past a happy young couple coming down the stairs who nodded and smiled at me as they went by. Good evening.
Your two worlds are colliding.
My murderous fantasy life, and this. It's a pretty girl, pretty name. Kim or something.
We're
Going out on a date.
Where I'd love to be going. And I'm aware of both of these realities, and the distance between those two is so dramatic, so amazing, so violent. And this...
I'm gonna go ahead and pause here. I appreciate the cadence, the spacing between the words that both Cameron and Kemper are using in this. They actually line up quite nicely, even as you could kind of hear through the audio that's overlapping there. So that's well done by Cameron, to be sure. Now, Ed Kemper is showing here this aggression where he's narrowing and lowering his eyebrows, and then also a little bit of disgust comes in the corner of his nose as he's talking about his own perception of himself in regards to these people. And that also is a fascinating part about Kemper that we'll talk about in a bit, about his psychology, that is just, it's an interesting facet. But let's continue watching.
Craving this awful, raging, eating feeling inside. I could feel it consuming my insides.
I could feel it consuming my insides. This fantastic passion.
It was overwhelming me. I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was impotent.
Physically, I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was.
So you can see that they've broken one singular interview, or what seems to be one singular real-life interview with Kemper, into multiple different scenes across Mindhunter to be able to get this to work and flow more like a story. So there is that consistency. Obviously, that's going to be off with that. However, we're still seeing a lot of the same patternings vocally across the two different people, and that's very good to see. Non-verbally, in the original footage, Kemper has stayed largely the same. He maintains that neutral demeanor throughout most of his interview, whereas Cameron's portrayal of him has more visually interesting characteristic to it. He moves around more, he has more body language tells, and this is all more interesting for a viewer of entertainment to watch. Once again, Kemper wasn't trying to entertain as the same that Cameron is trying to entertain. Let's continue.
I knew a week before she died I was gonna kill her.
I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her.
She went out to a party,
she got soused.
She came home alone.
I was woken up by that. I came out.
You know, that night I
walked up to her bed.
She's laying there reading a paperback.
So what I'll note about Cameron's side of things, which is difficult to see now, obviously, because we're focusing on actual Ed Kemper here, but on Cameron's side of things, he enters into this monotone recollection of that night, and it feels disconnected from the emotion of it, which is a fair representation of what somebody could feel or present while recounting something like that, but it's not what Kemper actually did. You could see that Kemper is having more emotional difficulty, and I find it more believable in that it's not constant. It doesn't feel like he's trying to force, and it has a normal emotional onset and profile throughout the rest of the emotion. We'll be able to see this. It's a fascinating glimpse into a small blip where it seems as though Kemper has perhaps an emotional response to some of the actions he's done. Let's continue.
As many thousands of nights before. She says, "Oh, I suppose you're gonna want to wait up all night and talk now." Can you believe that?
I looked at her, I said no. I said good night. And I knew I was gonna kill her. You know?
And I knew I was gonna kill her. You know, I was honest with myself for the first time.
And that's the first time in 10 years I've looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly. It hurts. A 6 young woman dead because of the way she raises her son and the way her son is raised, the way he grows up.
And now everyone knows.
I want to go ahead and pause here. So we're hearing the emotion in Kemper. We're not hearing that emotion in Cameron. Already talked about that and pointed that out. Talked about the synchronization from Kemper. I do believe that this is a genuine moment of emotion here. Now, what I'm noticing about real life Kemper's mindset about this is his interesting relationship to the responsibility that he has, the control that he has in what he was doing in regards to all of the different murders that he did. He tends to hang a lot of his responsibility on his treatment from his mother, while also trying to maintain that this was all something that he himself chose to do. So it's this fascinating deal. And what I noticed in this, and we'll hear it here more so as this wraps up here, is that Kemper almost views himself, his actions and his body, like himself as an individual, as a character in a book that he's also reading. So it's not like he's able to control what the character in the book is doing. He's just reading what the character in the book is doing, and there's nothing he can do to change it. That's fascinating because that's not taking responsibility for your actions. That's just trying to hang it on something else as if, there was no other way that this could happen. And there were so many other ways that it could have happened, but let's continue.
It was because of what she did to me, because of the way she treated her son.
I rationalized that to give up would be insane. To give up would be crazy. I'd be giving away my freedom, and I don't need to. But I look back on that and wish I had earlier when I was saying those things to myself. The people who were later dead wouldn't be. The regret that came later would have not had to be. Those people, not things, those people would still be with their families, with their loved ones.
I know it's silly, but Mom always...
So there as well, that's an aspect that we're hearing of the original Kemper being very aware of how terrible his actions were and how much effect they were having on the people that he was doing them towards. Which is why this fascinating aspect of I didn't have much opportunity or choice to really change or do something different, or he regrets it, things like that. He plays off this, I couldn't help myself, but he was the only one that could. It's just interesting. All right, let's wrap this up real quick.
I know it's silly, but Mom always liked people to look up to her. Whoa.
Okay, so that's the end of this little segment here. We were able to see some similarities, actually, I would say, between both how Zac and Cameron portrayed their counterparts. For the most part, what we're noticing is that for an on-screen talent, we are going to see more dynamic body language. It's going to be more out there, it's going to be more verbose, it's going to be more entertaining to watch. Along with that, we're going to see more emotively driven nonverbal communication because that is what feels more realistic and feels right to us. So in these characters that these talents are trying to play, they pour the emotion that is supposed to be in there into their characters. They pour the mindset into there, and because of who they are, it shows non-verbally. Now, with the actual people themselves, it's that disconnect, that disjoint that makes things feel very uncomfortable and unsettling for people. With Ted Bundy, it's the lack of emotional response to the people he was interacting with, how much domination and cool, collected, unaffected domination he had in his scenarios, despite whether or not he really had the upper hand. And with Kemper, it was the collected, calm, quiet confidence that continually showed up throughout all of his interviews, despite his describing of very graphic or terrible things that he had done, and that disconnect that existed in there. Now, with this, we were able to see Kemper have a rare moment of what seemed to be genuine sadness or grief, and that plays into this whole mindset of he tried to play off this idea that he was not guilty for what he had done, but also he was guilty for what he had done. Kemper was very complex, to say the least. So that is kind of what this video is centered around, comparing Zac and Cameron to their counterparts. So let me know if you did enjoy this video. If you do have other ones that you would like me to take a look at, let me know in the comments below. If there are other things like reality TV shows, we are getting back to Love is Blind, and the other things that you have been requesting are going to be coming back in. It's just been a little bit busy here as I'm trying to get settled at the new place and whatnot. If you would like to be able to get in touch with me more closely, there are a few ways you can do that. You could reach out to my socials. Either I or somebody on the team will reach out back to you. You can check the emails in the about sections of this video, and then also I have a PO box if you were wanting to go a little bit more analog and write a letter, something like that. That's all down in the description, but without further ado, that's all that I've got for today. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome, as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.